everyone, thanks for clicking on today's video. My name is Sissy, and for today's recipe, I will be attempting to make pierogies. I first want to apologize for my voice. I am getting over a cold and it doesn't sound great, so I apologize. My husband grew up with fond memories of his Polish grandmother making pierogies often, and he asked if I could try to make them. I said absolutely, but I gotta say they weren't easy to make. I knew they weren't going to be, but I had to try. Also, this is my very first time making a pasta like dough, and it was a workout. Today's recipe is inspired from a recipe I found from Delish, and because neither I nor my husband like dill, we did omit that ingredient. Also, I wasn't about to make mashed potatoes from scratch this time, so I didn't do that step either. Ingredient list for this dish include salt, 1 egg, an onion, mashed potatoes. Like I said, the recipe calls for made from scratch, but I like my handy dandy bag of potato, flour, sour cream, shredded cheese, and butter. Now, because I didn't make mashed potatoes from scratch, I kind of switched the directions for the recipe around and made the dough first, then followed with the filling. To make the dough, I whisked together 2 cups of flour with 1.5 teaspoons of salt in a bowl. After, I took a small saucepan and over medium heat melted together half a cup of water with 3 tablespoons of butter. After the butter is melted, I took the pan and poured it over the flour mixture and stirred it together. Then I stirred in the 1 egg until everything was combined. I had to knead the dough next, and let me warn you, I am very new to kneading dough. I keep watching videos on techniques on how to do it, and I still need a lot of work. Anyway, after kneading until smoothish, I covered it in plastic wrap and let it sit on the counter at room temperature for 30 minutes. While the dough was resting, I worked on the filling. Now, I ended up making more filling than I needed because I have no idea how many potatoes are the equivalent to the bag of the mashed potatoes I cooked. The recipe calls for 1 potato, so I knew it was going to be less than what I did, but that's okay. The filling was so good, it was basically fancy mashed potatoes, so we had that with another meal later. But before the potatoes, I caramelized the onions, which was 1 whole onion with 1 tablespoon of butter and a bit of salt and pepper, and it took about 15 minutes to caramelize. Then, after following the directions to make the mashed potatoes, I combined them with the onions, 2 tablespoons of sour cream, and half a cup of cheese. Or a bit more, because, can you really have too much cheese? Now comes the hard part. By this time, the dough was done, so that was perfect timing, and I took the dough and cut it in half. The recipe called for 3-inch round cookie cutters, and I'm pretty sure that's what I had, and it was about close enough. I had to roll out the dough to an approximate eighth of an inch thickness, and I didn't measure anything, so that was probably my mistake. The dough was super sticky. I kept having to add flour to the dough, the rolling pin, even my hands. Eventually, I was able to roll out the dough, but when I went to cut them with the cookie cutter, the dough was so springy it had a hard time keeping a round shape. If anyone has any suggestions on how to combat this, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Eventually, I was able to get roundish shapes and started stuffing them. All it takes is a teeny tiny amount of filling, and the recipe said not to get the filling stuck in the edge where you pinch the dough together, but that was very difficult to do. I managed, sort of. They came out looking right? Last step was to boil them. In a large pot with salted boiling water, I added each pierogi in a single layer, so I ended up making a couple of batches, and it took about 3 minutes for them to float. And then the recipe said to cook for another approximate 3 minutes for them to puff up a bit. I think I did it right. I just wish they'd come out looking a little nicer than like poor, wrinkly. I don't know. Maybe next time I'll try frying them and see how they turn out. Like I said in the beginning, it was not easy to make. I was also kind of bummed that the boiled pierogies came out looking, well, like they did. They were really tasty though. I need to get better at rolling out dough and getting a more consistent thickness throughout, as some were thicker than others. These little pierogies reminded me of a cross between a wonton and a ravioli. My husband was telling me there are all kinds of stuffings you can put in pierogies, but I have to say, this mashed potato, cheese, and caramelized onion is a definite comfort food classic. I would love to try to make these again and get better at making them. Would you try this recipe, and have you made pierogies before? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe. Have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you again soon.